To ensure that everybody has a enjoyable experience, please keep yourself muted unless you're talking. Any questions that come to mind during the commissioner's presentation, put them in the chat and we'll keep a running list. And then during the question and answer and discussion part of the program, you can ask a question in one of two ways. You can either type your question in the chat directly, or you can use the raise the hand function of Zoom and we'll call on you. So here's a quick rundown of our time today. Commissioner Seggos will give a 10-minute presentation. Then Lyndon Horvath, our Director of Development, will facilitate the question and answer and discussion part of the program. So now I'm very pleased to introduce Commissioner Seggos. Commissioner Seggos has been at the helm of the 3,000-person Department of Environmental Conservation since 2015. And prior to taking on that role, he served as the governor's Deputy Secretary of the Environment, in which capacity I first met him. And I want to give the commissioner a little shout out because he really was responsible for putting into play our Park and Trail Partnership Grant Program, which has been so successful and led to so many great projects. So thank you, Commissioner. And also no stranger to the nonprofit world. The commissioner in his early career worked at Riverkeeper and also the Natural Resources Defense Council. He's also a proud officer in the Army Reserve. So Commissioner, we're looking forward to your presentation and take it away.
Great, Robin, thank you. Hi, everybody. Hope you all are doing really well. It's funny, I did a talk last night called Pizza and Politics with some college students from around the country. And I didn't have any pizza. We just talked politics. Today's lunch and learn. I don't have any lunch. So we're just gonna learn. That's it. We'll learn from each other. This will be a fun trip together. Great to be with you all. Parks and Trails, New York, and Robin. I can't say enough about the work that you all do. Such a strong partner on connecting people to nature and advocating for the outdoors. Robin is right. We did first meet back many years ago when I was up in the up on the second floor, which is the governor's office in the state capitol. And Robin was just outstanding to work with, tough as nails. She came in with an absolute expert named Laura DeBetta, who I then stole when I came down to DEC. And she's been doing great work for us here on Adventure New York, which is sort of our connecting New Yorkers to all of our great outdoor spaces. So really just thrilled to be just on with you and to count you guys as friends and partners and to help to fund some of the work that you do. It's vital work all around the state. And I think as we know, last year, there was almost nothing more important than the outdoors. So I'm glad we were able to make some real investments in the preceding sort of 9 years of this administration. So I do have a PowerPoint slide deck we'll walk through. I'll try to hit the 10-minute mark on the nose. If I don't, you guys can scream. And I know that I am standing between you and the most beautiful day of the year that I can see through my window here. It is outstanding outside. So I encourage you to get outside if you can, certainly if you get bored with me. Let me share my screen and then we'll go from there. Let's see, from the beginning. All right, are we good? I'm assuming that's working.
We are indeed good.
All right, cool. So, look, I never like to compare DEC to state parks, but I think we are the better of the two agencies. I tell that to Eric Coolstead all the time, and he says it in return. So we are obviously great friends, and the two agencies are very closely intertwined, and we have an amazing mission. Certainly, our mission is somewhat different, as you know. Ours is to manage a slightly wilder experience. We are almost the gateway to the outdoors, where I think, as you know, state parks manages more of a managed landscape. I mean, it's very general, of course, but if you were to describe the two as being somewhat different from one another, that's one of the ways in which we're different. We've got 6 million acres under management. I think state forests, you think the Adirondacks, the Catskills, Zor Valley, and everything in between. So DEC is a big and broad agency, and we love our mission. It's challenging as it may be sometimes, but we have 3,000 amazing professionals. We have a very healthy budget, thanks to the governor, who's been really a huge supporter of ours and Eric Coulsade's since, and Rose Harvey's before that, since he first took office. So we have a good and solid budget to fall back on. But today is about what are we doing about our open spaces and our outdoors and people. And the theme of this, I guess, in some ways is promoting sustainable use, because, and that's an overused word, sustainability, but that is really part and parcel to what we're up against. So I think we are in the new normal of usage. We've been watching this spike happen over the last 10 years of people really eschewing trips to the Yellowstones of the world, the Yosemites, the Great Smokies, and rediscovering New York, if you will. Catskills, Adirondacks, in my case, but certainly all the great state parks that Parks manages. A massive surge in use, and it got only bigger, as you probably know, last year with COVID, with everyone cooped up in their homes for the winter and just desperate to get outdoors. Bikes all sold out, cross-country skis all sold out, camping equipment flying off the shelves. I mean, all of that is a really good thing, and we encourage it. We've been putting in place for years with I Love New York, a huge campaign. But at the same time, we then have to deal with the challenges that come with that, which is the impacts of overuse, the overcrowding issues, trash on trailheads, over impacted parking lots, and of course, search and rescue missions. We did more search and rescue missions in 2019 than ever before. 2020, we crushed it, 25% more search and rescue missions last year. And I don't know where we're gonna end up this year, but certainly the numbers right now are not good. We're up again. And these are largely people that are running into the outdoors, ill-prepared for what we have to offer, which is a very wild experience. As you know, the Adirondacks and Catskills in some ways are very, once you get off the trailhead and off the road, very challenging places to adventure, and people should not take them lightly. We try to get that message out. And, nonetheless, we pick people off of mountaintops. They're wearing flip-flops and whatnot on a regular basis. The last bullet there on equity, which is the great challenge that we are all facing right now, is how to make the outdoors more equitable for all people, and not just the destination, but the way in which people get to the outdoors. Something I'll touch on today. Public safety comes with all of this, and we've made pains to invest in making the outdoors safer. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of that falls on the visitor and the preparedness of the visitor, but certainly the experience of the place is a balance of public safety and enjoyment. That's a picture of Catskill and the investments we made at Catskill Falls. We also are seeing a surge in use in some places that are of particular risk. One of those being a tight corner on Route 73 in the Adirondacks, where we have in Keene, where we have a huge number of people that are crossing the street to get from small parking lots into trailheads. So we put in place this year a new parking system, a new parking management system with AMR to allow people to reserve in advance for parking spaces, or if they're taking the bus, to be able to get on a shuttle system to the trailhead itself, and then ultimately back into the back country. It's working quite well. Historically, this was a very cluttered and dangerous area, and I think this summer we're seeing much better numbers. And from an equity perspective, it's a no-charge system, and of course, allowing people to get off the bus and travel in there is an important part of the equity commitment we've made there. Catskill Falls, as I mentioned earlier, we've had a number of deaths at Catskill Falls of people going off poorly marked trails in the past and falling off of the waterfalls or steep areas. So we made some efforts to improve the area, a robust trail system, viewing platforms. It has significantly decreased the number of rescues we've had to do there, but again, public safety needs to be number one on that. Of course, public safety is also out on the street. We're working on safer parking options for and limits on parking at Catskill with DOT and state police. Zor Valley, often off the radar screen because we're very Albany and New York City focused typically, but Zor Valley way out in Western New York, just south of Buffalo, about 40 miles. Really one of the most beautiful places in New York. If you haven't been there, I really encourage you to. It happens to also be a very dangerous place. There's been a number of incidents there over the past 10, 20 years where this surge of people has people pushing themselves more toward the edges to get views of this beautiful valley, and the topography being as it is right there with steep cliffs has really presented a serious danger to visitors. And it's a very erosion-prone valley. So what we've done is effectively, I went out there in March, met with the survivors of certain folks who've lost their lives there, and implemented a robust agenda. We put in signage, we put in protective barriers. We did a huge outreach campaign to improve the awareness of using the trail system. We worked directly with Google executives and Apple executives to update their maps, because their maps, as I'm sure you all know, often show trails where no trails exist. That may be fine in, 5 Rivers. It's a different thing when you're talking about a place like Thatcher State Park or Zor Valley, where trails erode to steep cliffs on a regular basis. So that was something that we had to work with the companies on. PeekAMoose, Blue Hole in the Catskills. Again, another area, beautiful natural hole, swimming hole that about 5 years ago made it onto a top 10 list. And all of a sudden we've got 1,000 people there on the weekend with broken bottles and food and booze and fires and everything else. So we had to begin pulling back on that because it was simply unsafe. It's a miracle we didn't frankly lose a life there or have a serious incident. We've now put in place special regulations that are limiting use. Again, this may be commonplace within state parks, but for us to have these kinds of limits on discrete areas is somewhat new, and we're using them very strategically. And of course, mentioned public safety, now of course outdoor education. I mean, during the pandemic, we had to pivot very quickly, as everyone did, to the surge in use and all of the things that were difficult to manage during a pandemic, right? Something bad happens, typically we want to come together. During the pandemic, we were constantly trying to push people away from one another. And that's the social distancing, all of the mask mandates and everything else. And so we launched a campaign last year, which was Play Smart, Play Safe, Play Local, which was really encouraging people to not make those big trips to places that historically have been very crowded, like the high peaks in the Adirondacks or certain parts of the Catskills. And that campaign, well, I don't know that it was very successful because we saw, again, a huge spike in interest and people just really wanted to get outdoors. But we certainly knew education was going to be part of communicating all the various safety elements to the folks who were heading out there. This year, we tried something a little bit new, and this is going to be a sustainable campaign within DEC. This is the Love Our New York Lands campaign. You can see some of the artwork that our team worked on there. This campaign really has a focus not on promoting New York's outdoors. We do that through I Love New York. It's a very successful campaign. We wanted to have something of a tight and well-run and kind of crisp campaign on sustainable use, the smart things to do when you travel to places, the kind of preparedness you need to undertake, the leave no trace principles that we implement and market statewide. That's really what drives this. It's sustainable, it's stewardship. It's encouraging people to pack in and pack out, pick up trash when they see it, and so forth. And this is really to design a better approach to good behavior. Now we have put this. Of course, we did we've done press conferences about this. but we've taken it to the next level using PSAs. We have a robust web page. We're doing posters, trailhead education. We're doing real-time updates. We created our own Twitter feed to address some of those hotspots. Encourage everyone to follow NYS DEC alerts. Those are real-time updates for things like, is the parking lot where I want to go, is it already full? This is a frankly more nimble tool than trying to update a web page, which can often take quite a bit of time and money. And working very closely with state DOT, state police, all of the various agency partners that have an interest in backcountry safety and backcountry preparedness. This is just some of the artwork that we prepared. The know before you go. Keep it simple, right? Just hit people with very simple artwork and simple themes, and let that resonate. You see some of the things we try to get across. Of course, knowing, preparing, and then sharing the great outdoors. The outdoors belongs to all of us, and we want everyone to feel comfortable when they go outside. And of course, that is a social as well as an environmental need. Carry in, carry out, as I mentioned, leave no trace, which is good for the user experience. We want people to enjoy the experience of coming to New York's trails. We want to be the best destination in the country, and that means we all have a role to play in keeping the trailheads and the trails clean. And this is, I think, a really important one for all interested here is encouraging people to go elsewhere. And we have 20 million acres in New York. There's more to do in New York than most other states, truly. And I think part of that is smart campaigns, smart marketing campaigns that reveal that in the Adirondacks, the millions of acres in the Adirondacks is more than just the high peaks. We've got hundreds of other peaks, thousands of miles of rivers and streams and lakes. And let's encourage people to choose the road less traveled and enjoy their experience. So we put a lot of emphasis on that. Of course, all of this work comes together because we have determined to do it with partners. That's the best outcome. We know we don't have all the answers. We need to rely on others, and frankly, we need to develop these solutions together, because often the solutions aren't very easy to undertake, especially if you're changing the way people approach the outdoors or the way we manage the outdoors. So we created High Peaks and Catskills advisory groups. Those are robust groups that met during the pandemic, are still meeting in some cases, have given us a set of recommendations that are everything from improving signage all the way to developing a pilot system for controlling the flow of people into that AMR parking lot that I mentioned. Working with municipalities, right? They're on the front lines. I think, again, just go back to the Keene example, with the town supervisor is out there Saturday and Sunday mornings at 5 o'clock directing traffic. I mean, that is not a sustainable, certainly not a career enticer for anyone who wants to run for supervisor, that they have to also do traffic cop work. So working with the supervisors, working with law enforcement, getting them resources, understanding what they're going through, and helping to adapt some of those problems. All the stakeholders involved, obviously, and partners involved, obviously, need to be at the table and be part of that solution. And we try to make ourselves available on a regular basis, fielding hundreds, in some cases thousands of inquiries about conditions in the field and how, just basically answering the basic questions. And, where do I park? How do I eat? How do I get a ticket? What are the trailhead conditions? Are there rangers up there? And so on. And of course, partners in equity, so that we understand better how to manage the outdoors toward the more equitable scenario where, again, all people feel comfortable traveling to the Adirondacks, traveling to the Catskills, and once they're on the trails, that they feel comfortable in the backcountry. And I just wanted to throw this one up there. I just came from this press event while we're on an equity theme. This is the Nature Bus campaign we just launched. Actually, you'll see Eric there from State Parks as well. This is a really cool pilot that we're doing with Capital District Transportation Authority. You see the CDTA bus there in the background, electric bus. The bus is going to run Saturdays from now, this Saturday, until September. And it's running a route right through downtown Albany. So effectively from the most densely populated and least nature-centric areas of the city out to a number of locations in the Albany area. So 5 Rivers, we do the event at 5 Rivers, which is one of our crown jewels, nature center and 500 acres, nearly 500 acres of open space. Thatcher State Park, county facilities, rail trail, the county rail trail, city parks. Really just trying to get this equity put into motion because we all discovered the outdoors last year, right? Some people didn't, obviously, and for a variety of reasons. We didn't want transportation to be one of those barriers. So this new free bus is going to run thanks to CDTA, Mohawk Hudson Land Conservancy, DEC, state parks, all these other partners, and not a huge amount of money to bring folks on a regular basis out to these locations. And ultimately, my goal, I want this to work. So I'd love your help in promoting this. My goal is to get this in Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester, a similar system. Find the right people in these various transit authorities, find the right funders, supporters who can help get the message out, ultimately connecting people on weekends. I think about Rhinestone Woods, for example, in Buffalo. Perfect spot to get people from inside Buffalo out to Rhinestone Woods. State Parks has wonderful facilities out there as well. We can do the similar thing. So I wanted to throw that up on the screen just to show what we're up to right now and how we're actually putting some of this talk into motion. But that's it. That's it for my slides. I think I went over 10 minutes. People are throwing tomatoes at me here in my office. And I will stop sharing my screen so we can have a real discussion. I can see if you are all still with me. Stop sharing. There we go.
Hi, thank you so much. That was phenomenal. And we will firstly suggest that everyone go to a gallery view if your computer hasn't switched over. It's in the top right hand. There's a little box that if you hover over it, it says view. And if you click, there will be a little drop down. And that way we can see each other for what will, I'm sure, be a stirring conversation. We've already been getting some great questions in. I will apologize in advance because I'll be looking between 2 computers. Technology is also tired of Zoom, it turns out. So, but thank you again, Commissioner Seggos. That was comprehensive, and I'm sure we've got a lot to dig into. So I'll just start with our first question to get the ball rolling, and then we'll pass over to some of the questions we've collected that I'll bring out, or we also have the raise hand option, as Robin mentioned, and we've got a small group today, so it should be perfect for asking questions verbally if you so desire. So the first question I had is a big one, but the DEC does quite a bit. It manages resources, as you mentioned. It has like the less managed lands that it oversees. It really is, looking into regulations and permitting. So given that you are a very spectrumed organization, where do you see the future of the DEC in operating as a land steward for New York State?
That is a very good word, spectrum. We certainly are. I mean, we are everywhere. We're in the middle of everything, which is exciting. I mean, no day is ever the same. We're in the middle of every economic development project. We're in the middle of every sewer leak. We're in the middle of climate change, dealing with marine fisheries, and of course, the millions of people going outdoors. So our obligation is built into law. That's a starting point. Right, we know we have an obligation to manage natural resources in New York State, and there's no turning away from that. I don't believe there's ever been a commissioner who would ever have countenanced turning away from conservation. I certainly won't. Those that come after me won't. I mean, our agency is built to that. If you know any folks at DEC, it is astounding how many have been here 20, 30, 40, even some 50-year employees who have this incredible institutional knowledge on our state's environment and the challenges that are in front of us. I think it's often in our jobs in government, certainly in any job. You can get comfortable believing that what you're doing is the status quo, and you often miss the changes that are happening right in front of you. I think that the last 10 years has been an incredible transition of people kind of carrying along with the status quo, thinking that, you know, we had solved the issues of the state. And of course we were doing X, Y, and Z to maintain progress. But there's been a real seismic shift in people's understanding of the environment, the reality of climate change, the threats to drinking water, the societal mistrust of government generally, for a variety of probably well-founded reasons. You go back 20 years and look at the ways in which we can all agree that government perhaps betrayed us. And of course the 24/7 news cycle. So all of that comes together, and you think about the natural resources of the outdoor spaces that we manage. There's just more demand for it now. I mentioned in my remarks earlier, there's just more demand for the outdoors, and that's not going to change. That's that big paradigm shift that people aren't traveling to these faraway places. They've in fact discovered New York again. And how do we balance the surge of people heading to these places, and the great economic benefits that are finally being realized in some of these towns and villages that have been hard hit for many years? How do you keep the dollars there? How do you make people want to come back? How do you protect the natural resources of these beautiful places, of course? And some of the solutions are simple. You got to build better trails. The old way of building a trail is straight up a mountain. That kind of sucks for most people who are hiking. It also is terribly damaging for the trail itself. So rebuilding trails, and we're doing some of that now in the Adirondacks and Catskills, just more robust trails designed to last 100 years as opposed to a year. Better marketing campaigns, the leave no trace work that we do. Some of it is just simply going to be harder, which is solving some of the equity problems that we have. How do you address the distance between the Adirondacks and Albany? If you're trying to attract people from Albany and make them feel comfortable in that outdoor experience, that is going to take an enormous amount of time and commitment and dedication and dollars and partnerships. And I think that is going to be one of the real challenges. I mean, we work with the Adirondack Diversity Initiative, for example, and Nikki Hilton Patterson talks all the time about the difficulties that African Americans face when they travel to the Adirondacks. Aaron Mayer talked about that for many years as well. It's the harassment observed and experienced between the starting point and the destination, and it's the lack of comfort with it when you reach a destination in the backcountry. So we have to tear down those barriers. I want to give credit to my staff, Laura, for launching a great program, first time camper program, which helps to get that. It is relatively speaking a small program given the scale of the potential demand, but it's a curated first camping experience for folks that have never done that. It's largely targeted to folks in urban areas. So that has been successful. I mean, those kinds of programs over time, that's how we're going to continue our mission, stay nimble, understand that there's lots of threats that we have to adapt to, and ultimately, not lose sight of the fact that we have to keep the environment healthy. But if we don't connect people to it in a meaningful way, we lose the support for it, we lose the funding for it, and then, of course, it becomes more degraded. I think you're muted, Lyndon. Famous
I
words
have
of the
not
year.
done that for a while. No, thank you. That, as you mentioned, it's a lot to consider, and there are a lot of possible barriers, but a lot of opportunity areas as well. You did talk about trails and trail building, and we've had some questions on that. So we'll, focus on the trail area for a little bit. So first off, we had a question about trailhead access in the High Peaks region of the Adirondacks versus so privately owned versus state-owned trailheads. And is the DEC looking into creating more state-owned trailheads to increase access to, trails in the High Peaks?
Good question. I don't think the issue is trailheads as much as parking and where people stop. We do have a large number of trailheads, and I don't know that we have necessarily an interest in creating new ones. I mean, there are challenges within the high peaks, just where you site something, because the valleys are somewhat tight, and the road system is approximate to the steepness of the incline. And our view is we can certainly re-engineer some trails, Mount Van Hovenberg being one example. We're running a new trail completely, ideally using a parking area at the Olympic facilities to get into the high peaks. And then maybe some trails that are simply misplaced in that case. In other instances, it's really just finding a way to get people to the trailhead and away from parking on shoulders. That's what we have underway right now, and the season is somewhat challenged again because of COVID. But we're launching a shuttle system with the county and the town of Keene. The shuttle system being, let's park somewhere central, and the shuttle system will bring you to the trailhead. Make the trailhead a bit better, of course, so that there's actually a garbage can and restroom facilities, and that's my long-term view, is to have really nice, culturally, aesthetically appropriate restroom facilities at these trailheads. But that would be my goal, is really thinking about a better way to get people from centralized parking locations.
Thank you. So we have another question that actually kind of goes towards parking and trailheads, because the two obviously do go hand in hand. So have you considered putting up webcams at heavily used parking lots? If yes, would you think of adding in, a small weather station to, track wind, temperature?
Maybe. I guess it would. I'd have to know what the purpose would be. I mean, as some of these valleys have terrible cell phone service as it is, and putting in anything can be difficult for just connectivity purposes.
Yeah.
We often want to know what the condition is at the trailhead from a parking perspective. Mm-hmm. Without connectivity, there isn't an easy way to do that. So it really relies on shoe leather or tire rubber to drive around and find those things. That's why we came up with this Twitter handle. It's maybe a stopgap measure over the next year or two, so that we can have somebody driving and flagging where there are concerns, putting that out on Twitter, and using that as a communication measure. Certainly the weather, that's a whole different discussion, but we've done a huge amount of work putting these new weather stations around the state. The Mesonet program, which didn't exist prior to Superstorm Sandy and Hurricanes Irene and Lee, we then worked with UAlbany to do that. Now 125 of these stations around the state. We now have micro weather detections, so it's reduced the amount of time that we have to put into driving around and finding out where the snow is or where the ice is, because now we have a better technology system to do that. But certainly any use of technology, I'm a fan of it. We were the first and biggest adopter of the drone program in New York. That's again another discussion, but we like to use technology when we can to make our lives easier.
Great, thank you. This is the last of the recently collected Trails questions. I know that Robin has a ringer that I'll pass off to her in a moment after I ask this one. But will the recent appeals court ruling what will the recent appeals court ruling do to trail construction and maintenance?
Right, well, the recent appeals court ruling is somewhat recent. In legal terms, a very recent decision, so we are still digesting it in some ways. Would you mind giving everyone like just a little brief blurb about what we're discussing before we dive in? So. Sure, I love detailing case law in which we are the losing party. So there's a challenge to our ability to create. To cut certain sizes of trees in the Adirondacks. And the Court of Appeals determined that ultimately that there's these so-called Class II connector trails, which are snowmobile trails, could not be built through certain parts of the forest preserve. So the decision it's big. I mean, there are big implications to it. It's broad. I mean, we literally are still trying to unpack it. But there was a time in which the case had been filed and worked its way through the appeal system that we had to slow down, if not completely stop some of our work because of the questions surrounding it. And that involved, everything from, of course, the snowmobile work all the way to regular trail maintenance and creating parking lots and running water lines and things like that. So we are seeing that obviously there's a need. We now have the ability after COVID to get back out there and do some projects. We see the desperate need in some cases to just do basic work to improve the outdoor experience in the Adirondacks. We're trying to assess what the judges actually meant with some of their language, but that'll play out over the course of the next few months for sure. Some of these things you never really know until you get back out there and start doing the work. But we lost.
Apologies for that.
It's okay. Listen. We understand our goal. Our goal. I get back to my balance. The balance that I was talking about earlier. We have an incredible task to balance a huge number of needs across the state. It isn't always easy, and of course, not every stakeholder is satisfied with the decisions we make. But we generally try to be deliberate on our decision making, and ultimately try to bring as many people along for the ride when we make a decision. And that's what will always be, is just trying to find that middle ground, trying to find opportunities for local governments and businesses to thrive and survive, but also, again, to protect the outdoors, which is our constitutional mission.
Right. Well, I mean, if it's a constitutional mission, you can't argue with that. Robin, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Yeah, I don't really have a super ringer question, but a couple.
That was a ringer, by the way. Lyndon had the ringer.
Yeah.
It was in the chat. I cannot take credit for coming up with that one on my own. So it was others' brilliance and knowledge. I just get to ask it.
So I guess I'd like to hear a little bit about DEC's involvement and commitment to rail trails. I know that you've developed and are developing quite a few. And I also wanted to just bring up the Adirondack Rail Trail issue. I know there was a lot of people that are unhappy. The schedule that kind of was made public is that the rail trail won't be completed till 24, but the rail corridor will be completed, next year maybe. So, how did that come about? And
yeah, we'll talk about litigation, right?
Yeah, I guess it's a little bit of a ringer.
Everybody wants the project done immediately, and so do we. The Adirondack Rail Trail, dates back to almost my first few months in the governor's office. Let's say first year, 2013. We conceived of this corridor that we would convert from what is effectively a rail corridor from half rail to half trail, and that worked its way through basically litigation until we got effectively a favorable path forward. Worked very closely with the APA and DOT to conceive of the investments we need to make in this area. Of course, then COVID came along right in the middle of our groundbreaking and threw a wrench into our works. I should have said, and at the outset, we have 3,000 people at DEC. We had 1,000 people working on COVID issues last year. So whether that's vaccine sites or testing sites or delivering food or taking unemployment calls with the Department of Labor call center, you name it, we were out there doing it. And some of the things that did not happen involved some of the projects. And also there was a hiring and spending freeze while the economy cratered. So we've tried to keep on track with most of our projects. We definitely would encourage as many people as possible who have passions for these places as I do to remain optimistic that we will get back on track, no pun intended, with the rail trail commitments that we've made. It's a personal pledge of mine to do so, and I know the agency is really excited about connecting Tupper Lake and Lake Placid with this amazing corridor. There was a cool write-up on that recently, but rails are coming up. Now, we expect most of that to be done by the end of the summer. The work's going to go in. We'll do the work as quickly as we can, given the past funding constraints and staffing constraints that we had, and make it succeed for the betterment of all of the Adirondacks.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, I might have another like tough one to throw out, but sorry, Basil will never come back. But you mentioned, constraints, especially, in funding and staffing. And, you talked about a 25% increase in rescues over a 2019 that saw the highest number of rescues ever. You have the Love Our New York Lands campaign coming out, between increased use year over year, the parking issues, and probably increased needs on staff for those to just check and track and write tickets. Where is DEC with, staffing issues and funding? Is it a limiting factor? Is there advocacy that folks can get involved with to, kind of push forward more staffing for our public lands?
Good questions. I get that literally every time I do a Zoom or a budget hearing or anything else. Do we have enough staff? So I think, if any of you are involved in business, you don't always just throw people at problems. You have to think about the problem itself. Can you do better with what you have? And there's always efficiencies to be gained. We've worked hard to break down silos within the agency and have divisions work more closely together, and even outside the agency, partnering up with folks at state police or DOT or any of the other agencies. So I think we have done that, I think, pretty well. It often doesn't get recognized, some of the hard work that goes in there, and people focus on just the numbers of people in the outdoors and the rescues and everything else. But I think, given that we are in this new normal, my view on staffing is that we need to adapt to it. We can become more efficient, but we need to adapt to it, and that means increasing some of our numbers. We are now coming out of COVID with no staffing increases. We have just gotten the green light to do a law enforcement academy, which is fantastic. We expect that to be a much larger one than in past years. So that will result in greater numbers of folks from our Rangers and ECO divisions in the outdoors. So that will be making more of that clear and very public soon. But again, you have to work with what you have. You have to increase when you can. We've been given the authority to do that. And then you've got to remain vigilant. And that's really the Love Our New York Lands campaign, which is, it's not just on DEC and state police and DOT to rescue you. You've got to make the right decisions when you go in the backcountry. Now, we don't charge for rescues in New York. I don't think we ever will or ever should. You go hiking in the Himalayas, they're going to charge you to pull you off the mountain. There's just a certain degree of education that needs to take place here in New York and elsewhere. Make people understand that they need to get out of their cars with the right equipment on, tell people where they'd gone, with the right shoes on their feet, and then get back on time and have a backup plan. That's a lot of it, honestly. It's making the right decisions. It's going different places. This campaign is designed to do that. And we will adjust to the nature of the landscape, but we need people to, as they rediscover New York, remember that it's not a hike in Central Park or something else. These are wild places.
Yeah, great, thank you. That actually gets to another question that I think I can dovetail them in well, which is through the Love Our New York Lands, you said that one of the pieces of the educational campaign is, you know, kind of visiting the road less traveled. What kind of resources are you putting out there to, you know, educate folks about what are our lesser used resources and how they get there, and, you know, what to do when they do get there?
Sure. Well, we have on our website a huge number of suggested alternative trips. We're actually working with I Love New York as well on that, and state parks, to remind people that, again, people may see Mount Marcy primarily, they see it on the state flag, but people think about the Adirondacks, they think about the highest peaks, or maybe maybe 5 or 10 highest peaks. There's so much more, and we've been doing all of our printed materials, all of our press releases, all of our press conferences. We talk about these places. We promote them publicly. It's on the user and the viewer to make the decision to go to those places, but ultimately building out some of that infrastructure will help. For example, Frontier Town, a derelict facility in North Hudson, we reclaimed and turned into a campground, which will ultimately become a hub for Southern High Peaks access. So we did the Finch acquisition, which involved the Boris Ponds. Again, places that are still somewhat less traveled. There's Cranberry Lake. There's other places in the Catskills that get very limited use. So it's really all encompassing. We make every effort to remind people to go there, and of course relying on our partners. And every municipality wants additional traffic, right? Keene has got tons of traffic. I'm sure there are 50 or 60 other communities in the Adirondacks that would love to have that much traffic. So it's about, you know, working collaboratively with them and passing along resources when we can to support local government in these tourism campaigns.
Great, thank you. So I think my last question is going to be a little bit of a shift in focus from a lot of what we've discussed, but you know, with all of those wild lands comes a lot of management, even if it looks like it doesn't look like, for example, a very sculpted park. So where is DEC with invasives management and balancing that need for, you know, human enjoyment and use of wild spaces versus ecosystems and the animals who live there? And
yeah,
so that was a broad one.
Good question. I mean, look, invasive species has been decimating the landscape, whether we see it or not. It's been happening now for a few years in New York and elsewhere for that matter. I mean, there's a huge number of invasive species, aquatic and terrestrial, that we're experiencing in the landscape. It's changing the quality of water on a huge number of lakes in North America. It is significantly, severely impacting our trees. Think about the ash trees or the any of the species that are typical of the landscape here in New York. I mean, many of them are being heavily impacted. So education is a really important part of that, is to ensure we put huge resources into letting people know, for example, when they're moving their boats, to do a clean, drain, and dry approach to moving your boat. Clean it, drain it, dry it. We have boat stewards, more than 200 locations around the state, helping to promote that. We've got boat washing stations we've invested in on the Northway and elsewhere, so that we can easily direct people into getting their boats washed as they move between bodies of water. Some cases, I think we're getting up to the Endangered Species Awareness Week. So we do a blitz of advertising during that week to ensure that people are being made aware of the threats posed by invasives. So it's an all-in campaign every single year. It's not going away. We have, I think, $30 million. I think it's $30 million out of the EPF that's going into prevention, eradication, education. I can confirm that number offhand, but prevention is really the best. Of course, if you get invasive species within a body of water, you can eradicate it. It's a lot more expensive to do so. But you need to move really quickly on these things because it can severely impact water quality, of course, property values, and then turn tourism away, and it become a place where people don't want to go. So big issue, and everyone's got to be aware of what how they make decisions when they travel.
Great. Thank you so much. I actually have like one last cheeky
Okay.
question.
Sure.
So you mentioned that, the DEC is far better than parks. I personally am going to claim no comment on either. But considering you brought the rumble to the beginning of the presentation, what is your favorite public land in New York State? Like, or area or spot?
There's probably three. And it's really, whenever one thinks of one's favorite place, it's always connected to something personally. For me, it's just the growth of my kids. And my twins are 10 and I have a 12-year-old, 3 girls. It's the memories of the places I've been with them. And that's really 3 places significantly. One is 5 Rivers here in Albany. DC's really beautiful 450 acres with nature center. The second would be Thatcher Park, again, right near me, right? Everything is local. Spend a huge amount of time in Thatcher Park. We all do as a family playing, skiing, hiking, everything, cross-country skiing. And the third being Wellesley Island State Park in the Thousand Islands. That I'm lucky enough to be able to go up there in the summers, and that's just my favorite place on the planet. And I think that if that's what people really connect with is where they have personal experiences, and I think that's part of what makes the campaign we did last year, Love, Play Smarts, Play Safe, Play Local, and also this year's campaign. I think that really pulls on the heartstrings of people who have personal connections with places. And I will say Parks and Trails you all do such a great job of that with the I Love My Park Day, right? That is like the perfect thing to connect people to the places they love and make them stewards of it. So every day is I Love My Park Day at DEC and Parks. But those are the 3. To be long-winded, those are probably the 3. I love other places also where my cell phone doesn't work, and that's like most of the Adirondacks. And I try to spend as much time up there way in the backcountry as I can, and of course experiencing all that has to offer.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sticking with us during the grilling session, and for all of the insight and honesty and information you provided during this lunch and learn session. It's been wonderful. And also a very quick shout out to Shayna Hogan, who is our parks team coordinator, who since we're shouting out I Love My Park Day and she's here, we can't not mention her because she did a lion's share of the work in all of the social media posts and communications we did and setting up of I Love My Park Day. So awesome. Thank you, Shayna.
Home run. Good job.
So I'll pass it over to Robin to kind of gently guide us out.
Okay, so thanks everyone again for attending our 3rd Lunch and Learn and contributing to a great conversation. And of course, special thanks to Commissioner Seggos for taking the time to speak with us today. I do want to point out, I'm not sure you're aware, but 2 of your favorite places turn out to be state parks. And
I know.
So I'm going to, maybe parlay that to the Parks Commissioner.
I think you should change your name to Parks and DEC and Trails, New York.
Yeah. Anyway, I just want to give everybody a little heads up to check your email. We're going to be sending out a very short survey as a follow-up to today. We'd like to know what you thought about it and what you might like to hear about for future similar sessions. So I think there's some emails if you have further questions up on the screen, and I hope everybody gets out today, visit a DEC site, a park, your neighborhood. It's just such a spectacular day. So it's been great hanging out with you for lunch, and now the commissioner can go actually eat some real food and not just digital food. So take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Of course. So I just removed Martha because I was like, everybody actually like removed themselves this time. What? So we could chat